My Hero Academia, Chapter 224, Resurrection Festival. So another fun chapter this week. It looks like the war between the League of Villains and the Liberation Army has officially begun and has a pretty interesting dynamic to it. So let's get into it because we got a lot to talk about. So we're immediately seeing the satellite that Destro was talking about in the previous chapter, the one that's tracking the League of Villains, and it's apparently owned by Feel Good Inc., you know, that company that we were talking about in the previous chapter that is paying homage to the gorillas. And this is the same company that guy Tomoyasu with the bangs covering his eyes is the board member of. So I think this is going to be significant to this arc because if there's one thing that go hand in hand with satellites in battle manga or just anime in general, it's usually like a gigantic laser. So I assume that this satellite is going to have some kind of crazy weapon with it because, like I said, that's like a common trope with anime. So expect to see some kind of laser coming out of this thing or just some weapon in general. It's probably going to come in later on the arc when like the tables have been turned against the Liberation Army, but, you know, we'll see what happens eventually with this thing. We're also getting some further development and camaraderie amongst the League here because we see Twice freaking out about Giran because we know he holds Giran very dear to him. It's almost like he owes Giran for giving him a place to belong. I mean, that's what he says. And then we see Tomura, like, take his mask off to kind of shut him up. And this seems kind of mean-spirited, and I mean, I guess inherently it partly is because everything Tomura does could be considered that. But it's also like, hey, Twice, you gotta calm down. Just hear me out. I'm gonna have to make you shut up by taking your mask off. But then once Tomura says what he has to say, we see him put Twice's mask back on. So he's like, here you go. Now you can calm down and we're ready to go. So I think that's further building the camaraderie amongst the villains here, and I think it's pretty cool. It's just making me like them all that much more. So we're also finding out that Yujiko heard the entire conversation between Tomura and Destro, but at the same time he's kind of squashing some of the hype that I had built up for myself in these previous chapters. So I assumed that us seeing those high-end Nomus in the tanks meant that they were going to come help the League of Villains in this arc take down the Liberation Army, but apparently that's not the case. They aren't even ready to be tested, or at least that's what Yujiko says. It seems like High End was the first one who was only ready to go out. That's why Dabi was able to use him. But speaking of High End, we're getting like kind of an official name for him, and that is Hood-chan, which is kind of funny because I guess that's what Yujiko like names all of his test subjects. He kind of just gives them a name and then adds Chan to the end because we saw that little Nomu with the liquid teleportation quirk. He called him John Chan. And so we're seeing that High End is Hood-chan because High End had like that hood over his head. This also disambiguates the High End Nomus as well. So now that we're calling the original High End Hood-chan or whatever the official translation for his name will be, it'll probably just be Hood or something like that. Because all of the high-end Nomus are high-end Nomus. So if we were to just call one high-end, it wouldn't really make sense considering that they are classified that way. And I'm sure that they'll all individually get their names when the time is right for them to be revealed. But along with that, it's revealed that Yujiko had a much easier time making these Nomus because he had the help of All For One, who of course has the ability to give quirks to others. So without All For One, it seems like this is much more difficult for Yujiko, and that's why these high ends aren't ready for battle yet. And it totally makes sense. I mean, I'm on board with it. I kind of wanted to see the other high-end Nomus in action in this arc, but it's fine. They seem to be a little too powerful, honestly. I mean, just one high end was enough to nearly kill the top two heroes. So if we have like 10 or 12 of these guys going against the Liberation Army, they're probably just going to wreck them all by themselves. Unless the Liberation Army is like ungodly in power, I really wouldn't put my money against 12 high-end friggin' Nomus. So now we're coming to probably my favorite part of this chapter, and it's when Shigaraki reveals his master plan for what he intends to do with this whole war against the Liberation Army. So essentially he just wants to jump into the deep end of the pool in the war here, knowing that Gigantomachia is eventually going to wake up and come after him. Because it's also recounted by Spinner in this chapter that Gigantomachia can easily pinpoint Shigaraki no matter where he's hiding. And this was revealed in the previous two chapters, I believe. So we know that Gigantomachia is just always going after Shigaraki, regardless of the situations, regardless of what's going on. So we can fully expect Gigantomachia getting his hands dirty in this arc against the Liberation Army eventually. Well, I mean, assumedly in 2.5 hours, whenever that will happen, in a couple chapters from now. So I'm guessing that, like, Shigaraki and the rest of the League are just going to be, I don't know, back and forth battle against the Liberation Army. The odds are probably going to be against them eventually because they got to have some crazy stuff. And they only have 6 dudes here, and they're going against, I don't know, allegedly over 116,000 people in this city. So I'm going to assume that the odds are going to be against them at some point. Like, they're going to be down and out. But then Gigantomachia is going to show up looking to take care of Shigaraki, but inadvertently he's going to have to take care of the Liberation Army at the same time. So this is like killing 2 birds with 1 stone for Tomura here, because he's going to have Gigantomachia wrecking the Liberation Army, Delaware, Detroit smashes all over the place, but he also intends for Gigantomachia to wear himself out in the process of doing this. So once Gigantomachia gets, I don't know, tired enough from taking care of like 110,000 people, I don't know if this is going to happen for sure. Just, we're just spitballing here. Then Tomura is like going to suddenly flip the switch and start taking on Gigantomachia in his weakened state and likely defeat him and gain his respect at that point. I mean, I just think this is going to happen because he says in this chapter he's not invincible, he just has too much HP. So he wants to wear himself out against like a mass horde of Liberation Army dudes. And I also further think this is going to happen because the doctor's like, wait, that's cheating. So the whole cheating line from Yujiko here could mean 2 things. Either Yujiko thinks it's cheating because he thinks having Gigantomachia take on the Liberation Army is just way too powerful of an asset for them, or he's saying it's cheating because he's going to have Gigantomachia wear himself out in the war, and then Tomura taking care of him after that is cheating. But, it all remains to be seen. But nonetheless, pretty cool prospect here for what could happen. So now let's get into kind of the big twist of this chapter, and we're finding out that Sliding Go is in fact a part of the Liberation Army, and I don't know, we kind of figured that this would be the case when he randomly showed up in chapter 218 or 219, whatever the chapter, I think it was 219. That chapter was actually named after him, so there was definitely some significance to this character, and the fact that he already knew that the gauntlets that Seltzer guy had were from the black market and they blew up because they're not well made. He just knew too much, and he was at the right place in the right time, and he's just some weird looking guy, kind of like just, I don't know, almost like a throwaway character. So something wasn't right about this guy. So yeah, this is confirming that he is in fact a part of the Liberation Army, as well as a bunch of other heroes in Deka City. Like, he says 90% of the population, including heroes, are a part of the Liberation Army. We see another hero on top of, like, a rooftop. He looks like a villain, almost. He has, like, the mask on and the cape. But also, we're kind of getting a glimpse of what Sliding Go's quirk is. And we assume that it has something to do with Slide, because, his name is Slide. But we kind of see him, like, sliding almost in this chapter. It's not really made too clear, but when he is pulling up to the League, we see him like halting the brakes from him moving really quick, like he's putting his heels in the dirt. We also see him just like moving without moving his legs in the following panels after this, because he has like his arms at his side, and we see like the gust of, I don't know, friction implied from his feet on the ground. So I assume that his quirk just allows him to slide like super fast without really moving his legs. So that's pretty cool. That's an interesting kind of quirk. So then they're confronted by the 2 executive members of the Liberation Army, I guess you can call them. Hanabata, the guy with the slick back hair, and Kizuki, the girl with the black sclera in her eyes. I don't know why she has that. Maybe it has something to do with her quirk, or maybe she's just the way she is. I don't know. It's not really explained yet. But they encountered them, and they established that, yeah, if you're going to want to get Giran, he's going to be in the tower. Also, a little fun fact is that the tower is also shaped like an L. That's like the Liberation Army's whole thing. They have the salute with their fingers in the L, and their building is shaped like an L, so they're just all about liberation at this point. But also, he like sicks some people from the city on the League immediately when they get in there. This is a pretty cool panel that we're getting here, where like we're seeing them all like massively attack them all at once. And it appears like a bunch of these guys have like emitter quirks. I don't really think we're going to get too much into them, but just looking at this one panel, it's pretty cool. Like, it looks like one of them is launching like roof tiles at them. Another one has like, I don't know, air blasts similar to like the Delaware Smash. There's another guy that looks like he's like turning into a werewolf. And then there's just some guys that we don't even understand what their quirk is. It looks like he kind of has like jelly fists or something. But I'm talking about the bald guy who's like, Shigaraki Tomura! And then, speak of Tomura, wow, he gets an amazing moment in this chapter when he just wrecks two guys at once. Just like with one clean swipe of his decay quirk. I mean, they just get exploded. Pretty damn cool. This reminds me of like stuff that Chisaki was doing. And I know that Tomura was always kind of capable of doing something like this, you know, like instant decay, instant disintegration of his opponents. But maybe this is also further showing that he has improved himself from the month-and-a-half training against Gigantomachia. I mean, I think that kind of goes without saying, but we're kind of seeing it on display here, like he's gotten faster and more precise with his quirk, if you will. And then at the end of this chapter, it looks like we're getting the first executive fight, because it's going to be Toga taking on Kizuki. At least that's what is implied to be happening here. And we're kind of seeing what Kizuki's quirk is. It looks like she has like pinpoint explosion quirk. Like she could focus on an area and it explodes. So I assume that this only works on non-living things, because Toga says the ground exploded. And that's a lot of the stipulations with quirks, like especially like the really powerful ones. Like usually they won't be able to work on living things. I mean, of course, there are some cases where they do, like with Chisaki and Tomura's quirk, but it looks like if she could use it on living things, she would have just exploded Toga's leg instead of the ground. So I'm just guessing that here. And it looks like if she puts her fingers in like the box formation, like the gesture that we see her using at the end of the chapter, I guess that's how she can pinpoint the location of what she wants to explode. And that's kind of different. That's an interesting quirk. We haven't really seen something like that yet, at least not that I could think of off the top of my head. But this should be an interesting fight. And also Kizuki says something about Toga that implies that her origin is kind of known. Because she's aware of who Toga is. I mean, we know that the Liberation Army got a whole bunch of information on the League here, but the way that she says it, like the high school girl's descent into madness, and she also says about how like you're like the result of like a chain of death by blood loss incidents. So we might be getting Toga's origin story in this arc, and hey, why not? I mean, if this is like a League of Villains exclusive arc, let's just get the backstory in all of them. Because we already got Tomura's backstory. We got more into Spinner. So let's get Toga's, because Toga's backstory has kind of been alluded at this point, along with Dabi, although we already kind of know what's going on with Dabi. So that's pretty much it for the chapter, and like I said, I had a lot of fun with this one. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with the rest of this war, because it has officially started at this point. It doesn't seem like things are going to calm down for the next couple chapters. And there's like a really interesting dynamic to this war, because they're all in this city that is essentially locked off with 100,000 people against them, and they can't really hide either, because we see 3 panels of security cameras tracking them. So they're just going to constantly be on the run, being hunted at the same time. It's just a lot of fun, and it's only going to get better once Gigantomachia shows up. Oh my god, I can't wait for that. So let me know what you think about the chapter in the comments. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think we're going to get Toga's backstory? And what do you think Toga's backstory is? I mean, it's probably nothing too complicated, but yeah, I'd like to hear what you think. And if you liked the video, please give it a like. I also have a Patreon. Gives you access to a Discord and a Q&A video that I do on this channel every week. And if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.